What if I told you that in one of the richest countries in the world, a silent war is being waged not with bullets, but with budgets, and its victims are not soldiers, but children, millions of them, not because of something they did, but because of a decision made far from their classrooms, in boardrooms and offices, where numbers matter more than dreams. Imagine a 6-year-old waking up each morning with the hope of learning, only to find her school underfunded, her teacher overwhelmed, and her classroom stripped of basic tools. Now imagine that multiplied by 10 million. In 2025, the US government froze $6.2 billion in educational funding. It wasn't a headline for long. It didn't spark protests in every city. It didn't even cause a ripple among those who will never set foot in a public school again. But in hallways that smell of stale chalk and cafeteria trays, that number was a death sentence. This isn't just a policy decision. It's a generational fracture, the kind that doesn't scream, it fades, slowly, until we forget what a thriving education system ever looked like. This video isn't about politics, it's about futures. About who gets to dream and who gets left behind. And if you think this doesn't affect you, keep watching, because the child who loses their chance today might be the adult you'll depend on tomorrow. They didn't just freeze a number, they dismantled a lifeline. When $6.2 billion vanished from public education funding, it wasn't abstract, it was precise. Transportation grants were slashed, school meal programs halted, mental health services for students disappeared overnight, bilingual support systems for immigrant children gone. The cuts didn't happen on paper, they happened on playgrounds, in hallways, in lunchrooms. They happened to kids who already had the odds stacked against them. In California alone, over $1 billion meant for underserved communities was frozen. In Texas, rural schools that relied on state buses saw entire routes eliminated. In New York, counseling programs were suspended indefinitely. And in hundreds of school districts across the country, teachers were left wondering how they'd do more with less again. This wasn't a budget adjustment, this was an educational amputation. And while some districts found ways to survive through emergency funds or private donations, most didn't. Because when your school was already under-resourced before the freeze, there was nothing left to cut flesh. What's more devastating is who these cuts truly target. They don't strike the elite private schools nestled in safe zip codes. They hit the children who needed that one free meal a day. The child whose parents don't own a car and depended on the yellow bus. The immigrant student trying to learn English and navigate a new world. The kid whose only safe space was the school library. These services weren't luxuries, they were oxygen. And now they're gone. The numbers don't cry, but the children do. And yet, most of the country hasn't heard them. Because their silence is quieter than a news cycle and easier to ignore. It's easy to say 6 billion. It rolls off the tongue, neat and round. But what does that number look like in real life? It looks like Miguel, 10 years old, who now walks over 3 miles each day to school because his district cut transportation. His shoes were thin before the semester ends. Rainy mornings mean wet clothes and cold classrooms. He still shows up every day, but his grades are slipping. Not because he's lazy, because he's exhausted. It looks like Ms. Carter, a 4th grade teacher who now teaches 48 students in a classroom built for 25. Her lessons are interrupted by broken air conditioning, chairs with missing legs, and students fighting over worn-out textbooks. Last month, her class went an entire week without access to running water. She buys markers with her own paycheck, skips lunch to help kids read, and still goes home wondering if it's enough. And it looks like Amino, a recent immigrant from Sudan. She arrived in the US just in time to watch her ESL program disappear. She's smart, brilliant, but she can't keep up because there's no one left to translate the language that holds her future hostage. Her teachers want to help, but they're drowning too. These stories aren't exceptions, they're multiplying, because behind every budget line is a living, breathing human being. Someone with a face, a family, and a dream they didn't know could be revoked with a single pen stroke in Washington. This isn't about politics, it's about proximity. The pain isn't far away, it's next door, in the apartment below yours. In the cafeteria where your niece eats lunch. And unless we look closely, unless we choose to hear it, this suffering will remain silent, until one day, it knocks on your own door. When a school loses funding, the collapse doesn't happen overnight. It begins slowly, quietly, like a domino tipped in a faraway corner. At first, it's a missing counselor, then a delayed bus, a cancelled after-school program, a broken heater left unrepaired, but eventually, the pieces begin to fall faster, harder, louder, until the entire system buckles under the weight of its own neglect. It starts with attendance. Kids stop showing up, not because they don't care but because the support they depended on is gone. For many, the bus was their only way to get to school. The free lunch was their only hot meal. The school nurse was their only health care. Without these, a child's reason to be present fades fast. And when they don't show up, they fall behind. Test scores drop, graduation rates shrink, dropout numbers rise, and so does something else: crime. Because the further kids drift from classrooms, the closer they fall into cycles of desperation. It's not theory, it's proven. The dominoes don't stop there. A weaker workforce, higher unemployment, more reliance on public aid, less innovation, lower GDP. Every child who slips through the cracks today becomes an adult. The system will fail again tomorrow. And still, those in charge act surprised. But here's the truth. This wasn't an accident. It's a chain reaction set in motion by choice, and the fallout is growing. Education isn't just about reading and math. It's a shield against poverty, against violence, against hopelessness. And when we strip that shield away, we leave millions exposed. This is the cost of ignoring that first domino. Not just one fallen child but a toppled future. The question now isn't whether the dominoes are falling. It's whether we still have time to stop them. In 2008, as the financial crisis swept across the United States, education budgets were among the first to be gutted. School closures, teacher layoffs, and cancelled enrichment programs became the norm. For a decade, districts fought to recover, but some never did. A generation of students passed through broken systems, forever shaped by a deficit they didn't create. Now, in 2025, it's happening again, but quieter this time. No Wall Street collapse, no dramatic headlines, just cold, calculated cuts dressed in bureaucracy. And like before, it's the most vulnerable who pay first and most. But the playbook is older than that. Look at history's great collapses, and you'll see a pattern. The decline always begins with the erosion of knowledge. Empires lose their edge not in battlefields, but in classrooms. When education crumbles, so does the future, and not just for the poor, for everyone. We tell ourselves this time is different, that we're smarter, that we've learned. But have we? Because while the world advances AI, clean energy, global cooperation, we are, astonishingly, choosing to disarm our next generation, not from war, but from wisdom. The lesson was written decades ago: invest in minds, or be ruled by ignorance. We didn't learn it then. Will we now? When billions disappear from public education, it doesn't vanish into thin air. It moves quietly into new hands, into systems designed not to educate everyone, but to benefit a select few. And the deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes. Someone always profits when the public loses. Private education corporations see an opportunity. As public schools starve, charter schools and for-profit institutions step in, offering alternatives. But these schools often serve fewer students, with selective admissions, and operate under far less scrutiny. They promise excellence, but deliver exclusion. And they're funded, in part, by the same taxpayers whose children were just left behind. It doesn't end there. Testing companies, consulting firms, and tech giants swoop into districts stripped of resources, offering quick-fix solutions for problems they helped create. They sell platforms, data systems, standardized testing packages, all under the guise of reform. But none of it replaces a caring teacher. None of it rebuilds trust in a forgotten community. Meanwhile, politicians frame the cuts as efficiency. They say bloated school budgets needed trimming. They champion parental choice, or eliminating the very options that empowered entire neighborhoods. And when the system breaks, they point fingers at teachers, at unions, at the kids themselves. It's a clever trick. Break the system, then sell the cure. And all the while, lobbyists win, donors celebrate, and stock prices climb while Miguel walks 3 miles to a classroom without heat. This isn't about helping children. It's about controlling the pipeline of knowledge. About choosing who gets access and who gets left behind. So ask yourself, when a system fails this hard, is it really a failure? Or a design? When schools suffer in silence, the damage grows unchecked. The stories of lost children, overwhelmed teachers, and broken communities rarely make headlines. The media, caught in cycles of sensationalism, often overlooks the slow decay happening in classrooms across America. And the public, many remain unaware or indifferent. But silence is a choice. Every moment we ignore these cuts, every time we scroll past a headline without sharing or discussing it, we allow this crisis to deepen. Because problems hidden in the shadows grow unchecked, and so does inequality. The truth is uncomfortable. Education is the foundation of a fair society. When we let it crumble, we're not just failing the kids, we're failing ourselves. The future we hope for depends on the investment we make today. And silence, it is the soil where neglect takes root. You might feel powerless, but your voice matters. Sharing these stories, raising awareness, holding leaders accountable, these are the first steps toward change. No movement has ever succeeded without breaking the silence. It starts with one conversation, one video, one act of courage. Because what we ignore today will define the world we live in tomorrow. Despite the shadows cast by these devastating cuts, there remains a flicker of hope, a chance to rewrite this story before it's too late. Communities across the country are fighting back. Parents organizing to protect local schools, teachers advocating for resources, activists raising their voices in city halls and on social media. Change is slow, but it is happening. There are ways to push back against this wave of neglect. Political pressure can restore funding. Grassroots efforts can provide support where governments fail. New educational models, community learning centers, tutoring programs, even tech innovations can bridge gaps left by budget cuts. But these solutions require awareness and action. That's why this message matters. It's a call not just to watch, but to participate. To realize that the education of millions is not someone else's problem. It is all of ours. The future of the country isn't a distant concept. It's built today, in classrooms and playgrounds, in textbooks and lunchrooms. Every dollar cut is a dream deferred. Every student left behind is a loss we all will pay for. We can still choose to protect our children's right to learn, to dream, to rise, but that choice demands courage, unity, and urgency. If this video moved you, don't let it end here. Share it, talk about it, push for change. Because a nation that abandons its schools is a nation that abandons its future.